We acknowledge that Guelph, the city where we live, work, and write, or play, or create, is located within the Between the Lakes Purchase, Treaty 3, the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We acknowledge that the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee and many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people have unique, long-standing, and ongoing relationships with the land and each other, and that the Attawandaron people are also part of the archaeological record. I read a great book by Jody Wilson-Raybould called True Reconciliation, and I really like that the way she organized it and the way she approaches reconciliation is in three parts. Learn about the past, learn about what happened, then understand, and then act. So even just going to a website, watching a movie, listening to Indigenous people's music or something, their art, consuming their art in some way. That's a way of putting it into action, not just listening and learning and understanding. So I would encourage that. All right. So as I said, I got this idea because my father was a watercolor artist, my mother was a banker, and I grew up with this conflict in the household that art had to be commercial, art had to be lucrative. My parents separated when I was very young. My dad went off and pursued his art, and my mom pursued her banking. And so I kind of grew up as a creator with this, as storytelling in my blood, but I didn't know how to express it because I had this unconscious idea that it had to be lucrative, that it had to be commercial, that it had to have some sort of money attached to it in terms of income. And so recently, through some personal development work, I sort of embraced that I could just create for the sake of creating in and of itself, and not necessarily to produce some sort of an income-generating result. And that was very liberating for me. And then I also, as I observed the world and talked to people, I saw and understood that a lot of people just create for the sake of creating. Or a lot of people want to create, but also may have some blocks. So that's why I kind of created this event to talk about creativity, talk about expressing oneself in all kinds of creative ways, not necessarily what would be conventionally understood as creative, like art. That is, of course, obviously a legitimate way, but Sharyn's got all kinds of different ways of expressing herself, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to her. So, and it is participatory. We'll have a conversation. I'll let you ask some questions, and then at the end, I'd like you to talk to each other. I want you to turn to your neighbor, maybe somebody you don't know, and sort of say, hey, what do you do? How do you create? How do you express yourself? How might you create and express yourself? Or what have you always wanted to do that you haven't done, and why not? And maybe find a way to support each other. Oh yeah, there's a potter in the audience or whatever, somebody else who does some sort of art form that might inspire you to want to pursue something. So that's how things will go tonight. But let's start with the conversation and an introduction of Sharyn Seibert. It's an abbreviated one because we'll get to all the things that you do and maybe not even be able to touch on them all. Sharyn believes in the magical healing power of nature and creates paintings and jewelry that communicate the wonder and beauty of the natural world. As we have some beautiful examples on display behind us, as well as you'll be able to take a look at some of her art and on the back tables there when you get a chance, and you'll be able to talk to Sharyn. Sharyn's a seasoned professional in the art and design field as a decorator, which I don't know much about that. Do you still decorate?
I went to Sheridan and got a diploma in interior decorating, thinking that was what I would do in my retirement, and I did, and I still do, helping out people with their plans. But my primary focus is the art.
Cool. Okay.
Which dovetails perfectly with decorating because you have to have some sense of placement and space and scale. So
Great, great. I'm going to go through the list here of institutions that you have studied at.
I didn't get thrown out of any of them.
That's great. Jeez, they probably started to invite you. Say, oh, look at that. She's got a BA at University of Waterloo, Fine Art at U of T, University of Guelph, McMaster, Lakehead, University of Western Ontario, the Michael John Angel Academy of Art in Florence, Italy. How long were you there?
6 weeks.
Wow. Was that mind-blowing, eye-opening, or boring?
Well, do you want to know the truth?
Of course. No, I want you to lie. We're going to censor this.
Lie first. No, it was incredible, but it was probably one of the hottest summers ever. And I left teaching, and the next day I flew to Italy. So I was jet lagged. It was probably on a Saturday, and I arrived at the school, and they made us sit. They call them ponies. Those people who have done life drawing. These ponies, and they're wooden slabs with a back on them, and we had to sit there for 5 hours and draw the model. And it was a special kind of measuring. It was very scientific. So it was based on the Renaissance. But it was so hot. But the good thing was that in the afternoons, because it felt like it started at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm sure it wasn't 7, but I'm not a morning person. So anyway, I would get there, and we would sit in the ponies and draw the models. But then in the afternoon, I could go and explore, and that was magical. And I think I got 3 hours of sleep for the whole 6 weeks because it was cooler in the evening. So a group of us would go and explore, and we'd be going over walls to get into villas and things. It was a little subversive at times, but it was really fun, and it certainly gave me a complete love of Italy.
Nice.
Particularly Florence.
Nice. And you've been there many times, I know now. As, in fact, so yeah, I'll jump ahead because you've led many art and culture trips in Italy along with Brian. Where'd Brian go? There he is. And became a specialist in Renaissance art. Was that after that? After you went to the Michael John Angel?
Well, I also. So that was, I think, in 98. And then about 4 years later, I took some time off school, and I went with Sheridan for an art history course based, it was everywhere. It was Assisi, Padua, Venice, the list. And so I was able to really bone up on my art history then. So.
Okay.
And the trips after that I did with students and with adults, it's really fashion on that trip. So I give a lot of credit to Sheridan for letting us canter off through the countryside and get credit for it.
Fantastic. So we mentioned jewelry, interior decorating, journals, art journals, and travel journals. Is that what those are examples of? Okay. Sketching, writing, all kinds of different creative expression, right? That's wonderful. Let's go back. We'll go back to your childhood because I want to find out more about your earliest experiences of creativity and who was somebody, a creator in your family or a friend or somebody that first made you realize, hey, I could create stuff for fun and that isn't like a job like a policeman and banker and whatever, doctor, all those sort of. When did you first discover creativity and from whom?
Well, I'll go through the laundry list of the people that were influential. My mother, my father, my aunts, my grandmother, my grandfather. Those were the the key people. My father was not in any way creative and none of them had any fine art bent.
Yeah.
But my father had an orchestra. He was a band leader. And he was a machinist, but then he had this other life, and the band played at dances. So our house was filled with music all the time, and they would practice at our house every Sunday afternoon. The windows would rattle from the percussion. I have no idea how we were allowed to stay in the neighborhood because it was so loud. I had to vacate most of the time because I couldn't study or anything. But anyway, this was my life. And my mother played the mandolin, and she wasn't in the band, but
That's fine.
but anyway, so there was all that creative energy about deadlines and getting music ready for the next event, and a lot of tension around transposing the music for different instruments. So there was that kind of creativity. And oftentimes I think, oh, well, my family was not creative at all. But then I think of things like that. Then there was my mother, as I mentioned, who was an excellent seamstress. She was also a knitter, and she could tailor beautiful suits and clothes for us and hats. And we would, on Easter morning, we would have these beautiful hats that she had made. And then if we ever lost a mitten at school, she would have, the next morning there would be new mittens there, and she would take me in the wintertime down to the woolen mills, and we would look at all the different yarns, and it was so beautiful with all the colors and textures. So I think I gravitated toward fiber art because of that. Then there was my grandmother, who in her early years was a cook, and at the Walper Hotel, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
And she also sewed, and I would watch her sewing little doll clothes. And she had 9 children, but she was still sewing these things for all the grandchildren. And she could just whip these things off. And I have gotten the sort of, not residue, but the effect, we call it the bocce effect, from my grandmother. So if there were going to be 5 people coming for dinner, she would make enough food for 40 people. So whenever Brian goes shopping and he comes back, now he's trained, he comes back and he'll say, okay, I got this. I'll say, what? We're only having these few people. Well, it's the bocce effect. It's my grandmother. So, and then my aunts were incredible. They were, there were so many of them, and they had a fashion sense that was impeccable, and they had an interior design sense without any training at all. So I think that there was something in the blood about taste and beautiful things and arrangements of things. So,
Wow.
And my grandfather had a garden that was just really exquisite.
Yeah.
But he also, and I think this is where my love of looking at stuff, I seriously, I walk down the street and I look at garbage, because my grandfather started the first recycling business in Cambridge. And so I would wander through these yards. Why they let me do it, I have no idea. But walking through these yards where they were crushing cars, and they were crushing pop cans into cubes that were almost like installation art. So I think the legacy that I have is resourcefulness, innovation, using what you have and creating something out of it, creating something new out of it. And
Wonderful.
I cannot help myself and I know that Joe probably is on the same wavelength. We both love cardboard. And I walk down the streets in Italy and I see all the boxes out there. And I think, oh, what could I make with that? So.
Wow. So you were immersed in it, like in sort of an expression and an appreciation for looking at things differently with sort of using the right brain and the left brain and sort of manifesting something with your hands for some sort of appreciation, whether it was music or something practical like clothing or whatever, but there was still a sensitivity to appreciating the aesthetic aspect of it, maybe not obviously or wouldn't have been articulated maybe, but you picked up on it somehow.
And as I said, nobody was doing fine art. I kind of thought I was adopted at one point because I thought, this doesn't resonate with anybody, but when you look below the surface, and I remember my mother they would sort of come to my bedroom and it was almost like I was in a zoo. And they would look inside. They wouldn't come in, and I would be painting away, and they would kind of be mesmerized, but then just quietly go away again. And so they didn't prevent me from doing anything. They were appreciative, but they had no idea what I was doing. And at one point, when I was really, really young, I think about my very, very early memories. My mother, I said, I must have been 3 or 4. I said, I want glue. And it was snowy out. There was no way that we were going to go and get glue anywhere. But my mother very resourcefully got cornstarch and made some concoction that was sort of like glue and said, okay, here, you can use this. And I thought, this is amazing. It just materialized out of nothing. And I could then I wanted to make a calendar, so I was making these squares, and I wanted to glue them onto a background, and so that was really one of my very first memories of doing any kind of art.
Nice. But you just mentioned painting, though, but so where did that come from? How did you just start painting?
I don't know.
Nobody else?
Nobody.
Just one day you said...
Nobody.
Yeah?
Not even in school. We didn't have art classes in school. I don't know. I was reading New Yorker magazine in high school, and they would let me stay home. I'd say, I can't go to school. I just need a day. And they would let me stay home, and I'd paint, and then I'd go back and, I always did okay in school, so it wasn't like I was really playing hooky or anything like that. But
right. You still kept up your grades. Yeah.
But I just started painting, and then that grew into a career, high school teaching. And
you taught art in high school?
Yes,
for high school students?
For many years.
Okay, all right, right.
At GCVI, just down the street, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Great.
So, and when you're teaching, you have to be versatile. I taught sculpture, I taught graphic design, I taught pottery, painting of all kinds. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then jewelry making, when did that come into play? What age roughly? And
actually, that was more recent.
Oh, okay.
When I was in Italy, we went to...
Which time?
Venice. Went to Venice and saw all the beadwork there, and there were some just very exquisite pieces in the windows. So I thought, I can do that. So I bought a piece, and then I tried to replicate what they did, and it took me months to figure something like this. It's all woven. So they're not just stuck on or anything. You have to. So anyway, so I have many beads. Right. I have enough beads for about 15 people for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you saw beadwork in a window, in a gallery, something, and just something clicked, and you said, "Hey, I could do that," or "I want to do that." And is it that you are now, I won't say trained, but like you are comfortable just, if I am inspired to try something, I just do it? Or is there a process where
I'm
you
not
have to
very
sort of give
scientific.
yourself... Okay.
I'd like to think I'm very scientific, but I'm not. I like charts of things, but I love making charts. Maybe that's where it came from, when I was a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, making the
Oh yeah, the calendar.
the grids. No, it's sort of like, I don't, when we get some furniture or something like that from IKEA, and I think, oh, they don't really mean that. Let's just see how it goes. And it never works out very well. But I don't have that kind of mind. I don't have a really well, no, I shouldn't say that, because I do. But step by step, no.
Right, more intuitive?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
sometimes
trial
it
and
works,
error?
sometimes it
Yeah.
doesn't.
Trial and error, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Great, great. And then when did art journaling come into your form of expression? Yeah.
In my grade 12 class, the students had to create, over the course of 4 months, a journal of their art journey. And they had to do writing and some art history and some paint, whatever they wanted to do. One student filled pages with popcorn, and her book was like this. You couldn't close it at all. So it was very interesting to have the freedom to do something in a book that wasn't going to be on a wall, to experiment, and to maybe take things that maybe there's a sketch here, but then it's going to get lost. So it's much nicer to put it in a book. At least it's all together. And there's something a little secret about a book. It's like a little diary. And some people are very hesitant to look in it. So I put little envelopes so that people, it's like Griffin and Sabine, those books where it was filled with envelopes from letters. So I fill my books with little areas where people can sleeves,
yeah.
so that they can find secrets.
Wow. So are these all yours?
Yes.
Okay.
I got
So you were taught it to your students, and then you were doing it
Yes.
with them, and then said, "Oh, wait a minute, this is kind of cool."
Yeah. And also in that Sheridan trip, we had to create a book, which is back there. And we had to fill it with some of our impressions, and there were some exercises that we had to do. But you don't always want to be working on something this size. It's great to work small sometimes.
Why?
And why?
Yeah.
Because it's more intimate. And it's my own thoughts, my own impressions somewhere. And it's also very, very useful, because somebody will say, "What was that restaurant that you really liked?" And I can just even find the business card. Yeah.
Wow. Is there any incriminating evidence in that book from your secret excursions into villas at night?
Actually, no. But we are going again. We are going again this was in Fiesole, in north of Florence, just a beautiful little town north of Florence. And this June, we are going, and our Airbnb is in Fiesole. And I'm determined to find that place. It even had broken glass embedded on the top of I think we were crazy.
On the walls?
Yes,
yeah.
So that you didn't, well, maybe it was for animals too, but I have no
Pigeons.
idea. That wasn't that long ago. I must be very dexterous, because I could get over that.
Wow.
Through broken glass.
Wow, there you go, Brian. That's what lies ahead.
He wasn't
You'll crawl
there.
through broken glass for her. All right. Are there any creators that still inspire you, and why? Like people that you look to for inspiration currently?
There are a couple of writers
Okay.
that I am galvanized toward. One is Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, but she has also written a book called Big Magic,
Yes.
and it is transformational. If anybody wants inspiration to write, to do art, to do music, drama, anything, it is the perfect book for you. It's very readable, even if you don't want to read it. It's on YouTube with her, and she's done so many interviews. But her philosophy is don't give it so much importance. Just do it. It's like a tennis match. So you bat the ball at a publisher or whoever, and they bat it back to you, fine. Just send it in another direction and keep on doing that. Because if you have been gifted with some kind of talent, eventually it will stick. And and then she has pages and pages of all the excuses that we have for ourselves for not doing it. And it's agony for people. It's agony for people not being creative. I hear their stories and they're almost crying and saying, I just can't do it. I want to be creative and I've got this energy, but I just don't know what I'm doing. And I don't. So she says, just give up all the excuses and just pursue it.
Yeah.
Even if it means that you have to get up 2 hours earlier in the morning, which I could never do. But that's what she says. If you've got a job outside of your talent, then you will make time for it.
Yeah. I'm really happy you brought her up. I even had a quote here: a creative life is an amplified life.
Yeah.
It's a bigger life, a happier life, an expanded life, and a hell of a lot more interesting life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a profound book. My
Yeah.
wife, Irene, would say I'm not creative at all. She's a real estate agent. And she couldn't finish the first chapter of that, and she said, I have to paint. She's just like, I want to paint.
Yeah.
And it was just like all of a sudden, all the blocks lifted. She'd never painted before, and she was just like, I need to do this. And so now she does, but not to sell it, just as a peaceful pastime that she looks forward to on weekends. And yeah, so.
And there are other people too. Jerry Saltz, who is the art critic for the New York Magazine, and he's so down to earth too. He has a very lofty position, but he's very down to earth. And he says the same thing. The best thing that you can do as an artist is, first of all, show your work. It doesn't matter if you feel that it's finished, it's not your very best. It's never going to be your very best. So go out there, show your work, get feedback. Also, talk to artists. He says, stay up late at night, meet with artists, talk about ideas. That's how you will become a better artist, not isolating yourselves. Of course, every case is different, but not isolating yourselves and not getting any feedback for your work. And that living in your own little bubble is not going to benefit you.
Yeah.
And then I like a Byzantine mosaic artist. You see this one piece behind me. I'm always overwhelmed going to Venice and going to St. Mark's and looking at, and also the baptistry in Florence is just stunning. Gustav Klimt is another influence. Georgia O'Keeffe. The nugget from Georgia O'Keeffe is, it may seem, what was her word? I don't have the exact quote, but it may seem that you think that your work is not going to be interesting because you've seen it so many times, because it's so familiar to you, but other people have not seen it, and it will have an entirely different impression on them. And you will get responses from people about their interpretation of the work. And you will see things in your work that you've never seen before because it's new eyes. And they are equating their experience with it. And I find that with this piece, that I could have 25 people and they all come with a different story about that piece. And it's not what I had intended, but that's what they resonate with.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever has that ever challenged your ego? Having somebody say, well, I see this in this, or geez, I bet you meant this by that, when it may not have been your intention or anything. How do you embrace or accept that other people are going to make it their own in some way?
Oh, that's fair game. I'm just a conduit. And the impulse strikes me, I make something, and that's another thing. Some works, that one I've planned out, but my work comes out of my hands. It doesn't come out of some plan. Occasionally it does, but that's what the stumbling block is. I'm getting off topic, but the stumbling block, because sometimes I have to convince myself, just get your hands moving with that brush. I just stare at the canvas and I think, oh, can't do it, leaving, can't do it. And then I just sort of force myself to start. Sometimes I turn off the lights and just draw because at least some energy is starting to come out. But in terms of somebody having a totally different interpretation, I think that's fine. No, it doesn't bother me at all. It's interesting. But then after, you can't not see it.
Right.
So there's a piece that I sold a few weeks ago, huge piece, and somebody came and they said, look at this. Did you mean for there to be all these animals in there? Do you see all those animals? And I thought, no. And so then I saw the skunk and the bird and the polar bear and the bird with the plumes and fish and a goose, and I had no intention. It's a landscape, and at some points I just sort of start scribbling and then filling in, and so something like that, you cannot ever forget that they're there.
Wow. That's fantastic. Now it's a collective piece, right?
Yes.
It's a shared piece. So whether it was with the high school students or any student or other artist, some of them do have fear of putting it out there, of getting feedback, of showing it.
Some of them.
Well, it sounds like you don't. So that's why I'm trying to get at is you don't have this. And so what do you say to them when they say, I couldn't show that. That's terrible, or that's not my best work, or whatever. Like how can you encourage or inspire somebody to get beyond that?
Well, there's no problem. In high school, you have to do it.
Right.
Or you don't get the mark. You have to participate in the shows. All right. But in the adult world, when I have been teaching, say, large abstract landscape classes or something like that, and I've had people in tears because they just are so afraid. So in that situation, I just give a whole bunch of, that's why these sketchbooks are great too, because you can just close it up after it's dried. You don't have to show it to anybody. But it is difficult. And sometimes it takes a collaborative effort with other people, say in a class or something like that, and people will encourage them and say, you know what, that's good. And nobody, I don't think anybody any artist ever has been completely, totally satisfied. There's always something, and maybe that's the human nature. Maybe that's the territory, is that then the universe sends you more ideas, and they say, okay, that's done out there. and then on to the next one, because then you can use those ideas for the next one. But it is a weird phenomenon of this unworthiness, the feeling of unworthiness. You're not good enough, and it's some kind of original sin or something that we all suffer from it, whether it's cake decorating or it's, I don't know, weaving a mat somewhere.
Yeah, there's always that fear of judgment.
Yep.
Yeah. But what I liked is you went back to that community of it. That's why it's important to not be isolated, to connect with other creators in your sphere, so that first of all you'll know, oh, I'm not alone in my fear or my self-judgment and all that stuff. But also you can get some validation.
And going to galleries too, and seeing the courage that people have had to go out there and show their work. And some of them are very, they have very great egos, and you think, what? How did they get into that gallery? And then you think, gee, well, I guess
I could do that.
I could try. or in a group setting, if you're in a group studio or something like that, and hopefully everybody's not at the same level of lack of confidence, so maybe this person has a little bit more that day, so they feel better about their work, and then they can lift you up a bit. So that's a good reason for being in a group gallery, or I put in a plug for our gallery here too. Yeah. That's been really wonderful. Working to deadlines and working to themes, and getting your work in there, and having a supportive group has been fantastic. In last year, 2 years, a lot of work, tons of work, but it's it's a catalyst.
Right. Yeah. That's at 404 York Road.
Artworks Gallery, Guelph. You can see our brand spanking new sign up there now.
Yeah. I saw a picture of Brian helping put it up.
And
you're famous.
Brian is my rock with all these things.
Yeah.
Schlepping and.
So you're, what's your title? Like you, one of the founders of the gallery?
Yes.
Right, and then
a partner, business partners.
Business partners. Okay.
Yeah, we have 4 business partners, and we have shows they're about 2 months long now. We used to go every month, which is crazy. Every 2 months long, and we also have one wall devoted to feature artist. So if somebody is from afar and they don't want to actually become a member of the gallery, they can come and have a one show.
Right.
So that's working really well. And then we get to be up close and personal with their work and with them. So that's another very fruitful partnership, because we can learn about their process and actually, where can you go to a gallery and pick up somebody's work and see it really closely?
And talk to the artist.
Yeah.
And you did an interview recently where you talked about if you just stayed in your studio at home and painted alone, you wouldn't have the same kind of growth or that this has brought you, this experience of working with artists and curating in the gallery.
Exactly.
So that's back to community.
Yep.
Right?
Yes. And we've done some community, we've done some collaborative projects. We participated in the Praise the Ward with James Gordon, and went to meetings, and there was a lot of cross-pollination there, which was great. We got to hear about what they were doing for theater and what were the music concerts were going to be, and the crazy Slinky House and everything. So that was very refreshing. And we also dovetailed that with Ontario Culture Days. So that's an Ontario-wide, a few weeks in September. So then we collaborated, we didn't collaborate, but we're connected with Guelph Museums and the city. And so our tentacles are a little bit more far-reaching. So that was really good. And Delta Hotel and the Tourism Board and all of those were involved in the tourism enterprise that has been happening in Guelph. So yeah, it's been really a great experience to have that gallery.
Fantastic.
Because there's nowhere to show in Guelph. There's here.
Well,
There's
yeah.
Red Brick. There's Silence, Majida downstairs. But those people are all coming for a different reason. They're
Right.
coming to eat food. They're not coming
Right.
to look at art. But in our gallery, you can take your coffee from Lost
yeah.
Aviator, come next door, enjoy your coffee in peace and quiet, and enjoy the art.
Yeah.
So, and we need reviews on Google.
How often do you change the art?
We were doing once a month, and now it's every 2 months.
Okay. Great, great. I'm going to go back to the blocks.
The going over the fence in the glass?
No.
You like that, don't you?
back to people's blocks and fears of telling the world about their art or whatever. Do you think that's a modern thing, like a post-industrial, commercial, capitalist society kind of thing, versus back in the Renaissance? Would they have been ashamed or afraid to show their art, or was art more, I don't know, accepted as that's what some people do?
Well, I'll tell you, up until the Renaissance, artists didn't even sign their work. So nobody knew. Those Byzantine mosaic artists, there's nothing to document who did it.
Wow.
Even in the illuminated manuscripts that are so beautiful and so painstakingly done, you couldn't tell. Well, if you were a real scholar, you could tell one monk from the other, but there were no names on it. So the Renaissance was the breakthrough because people had money. They were separating themselves a little bit from the church, but the church was the body that funded the art. So if you were not particularly interested in working for the church and doing religious art, you could kiss your career goodbye, because that was the game you had to play. So then in the Renaissance, artists could become rock stars. There's, Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Ghirlandaio and Fra Angelico and all the people that were that could put their names on their work then. But the work was still used for, in most cases, in churches. And for the glorification of the families, they would commission a chapel in their name and hire the best artist to do the work. So, but then as each new wave, as each new style emerged, it was a kind of a revolt against the one before. So those new artists were still having trouble because they thought that they were messy or they were not adhering to the previous style.
Right.
So you go through the Mannerist period, where the elongated figures and not true to life depictions of the human body, and then the Baroque period, which was light effects. Everybody looked like they were around a campfire. And then after that, the Impressionists, the Post-Impressionists, the Rococo, everybody. Right. So the group of seven here, they thought that they were lunatics, that they should be painting in the European style, in Homer Watson kind of style. So I think that there has been, people like to hold on to the past, except for things like the Mannerists. They like to hold on to what they know and what's familiar. And then if you bring something new on the scene, then those artists have trouble getting known and getting purchased. So, and now it's kind of a free-for-all. It's anything.
Right. Okay.
I don't know
So
if that answers your question. But
it kind of does. It does. My theory's blown away. That's great. It's not, in fact, if anything, in the modern age, anybody can create art now. You don't have to be commissioned or hired by the church or whatever, right?
do you know what the secret is?
Please share.
I think the secret is being able to talk about it.
Oh,
Not particularly that if you take 100 people going through that gallery looking at that display, would they understand it, especially conceptual art? Probably not. But if they can talk a good line, I thought that sounds so crass, if they can talk about their work knowledgeably, I think that's a secret, and if they can get published. If they can get, now it's all online magazines,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
few actual, bricks and mortar type magazines, but it's a big mystery. Art is a big mystery. It's, yeah. I
All right,
struggle with it all the time.
let's not go there then. Let's open it up again. So we talked about the gallery. So let's get down to your habits, your routines, right? So how do you create on a daily basis? Do you just what's your sort of process, your routine?
Well, I have a meditation for an hour, and then I light candles, and then I have chanting in the back. No, I don't. It's a free-for-all. I'm all over the place. I have a really wickedly beautiful new studio that Brian has just built in the last couple of years. So sometimes I go down there. Sometimes I'm up in the bedroom. Sometimes I am down. So I've got all these different places to work. It's ridiculous. I've got a work room, an art room in the house. I've got my beautiful studio in the backyard, and I've got this, stuff everywhere, under beds, everything. And I wear a ratty gray sweater that is, if I'm ever caught out in it by accident, I'm always really embarrassed. Or sometimes I wear a lab coat that's covered in paint. Sometimes I like pounding Argentinian tango music in the background. Sometimes I like it really quiet. Sometimes if I'm really trying to concentrate, I'll put earplugs in and just sort of be isolated. I would like to say that, I go down every morning at 8 o'clock and I have the same breakfast and I light the candles and no.
Yeah. That's great.
I'm
It sounds like
eclectic.
all conditions
It's
work.
eclectic.
Right. And you can create under any conditions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do sketches on train platforms, inside the trains. Buses are a little bit more dodgy.
Just because it's a little shaky.
Yeah, but then the drawings are sort of interesting.
That's true. They look like John Lennon
Yeah.
sketches.
Yeah. There's one, and Brian looked at it and said, I like that sketch. And I was standing at the luggage carousel in the Rome airport, and in jet lag, I could barely even see the people, but I thought, I'm going to be standing here for about another 45 minutes. I should do something. So I have this little sketch in the book, and sketches of being at the, there's this theme here in airports. watching people. There's one with the lady there with her dog, that the dog looked identical to the lady. And anyway,
All right.
there's lots of
And
variety.
writing, you write like handwrite or type text, poetry, fiction, memoir, anything of that nature?
Yes. Because I want to remember these things. And for one thing, if we're going to take people there again, I want to write down exactly what we did, where the door was. It's not where it used to be. For the Santa Croce Church, we had to go. So there's a lot of just, I keep referring to my husband Brian all the time, but he was reading it, and I said, because he's a writer, and I said, I don't know if I want you to read this because it's not that good. It's just, the everyday. He said, no, it's fine. But it's not polished. But I don't care, as long as I've got it down there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on the road trying to write what you just did the day before. It's not going to be stellar. And then by the time you get home, you want to fill up the pages with some of the pictures and things that you have.
Right.
So you're not about to start revising it all. Life is too short for that.
All right, great. I want to talk about Yorklands
Oh,
as
okay.
well. Are any of these from?
Yes. This is a tribute. Okay, so Yorklands.
Tell us, go ahead.
They may not know. Maybe everybody does, but Yorklands is a 1,000-acre property that houses a former jail and a reformatory, and it is based on Central Park in New York. So the grounds are really beautiful. Everything was planted specifically for aesthetic views. And also based on the Cities Beautiful movement. The Cities Beautiful movement was something that I think originated in New York with a bunch of architects and artists and gardeners, and they thought that especially in New York, because people were living in tenement buildings, and they thought that their mental health was suffering because of that. So they said if they could come to beautiful places like Central Park, that they would be revived, that they would have better mental health. So anyway, the designer of the grounds for the Yorklands, it's based on those principles. So for years now, we have been working to save that property, and it's getting closer. In fact, tonight, there was a big, Brian Scarrett is doing at this very moment a presentation about what's happened to turn this into an urban park. And there are a lot of people, they have the indigenous groups on board now, which is really good, giving their blessing. And it would just be a shame to have that bulldozed or otherwise defaced.
Right.
So I have been on volunteer committees for years, and some of that has involved being in art shows and raising money for to further our efforts for turning this property into a park. So there was a year that I went out practically every day, wind, rain. I would sometimes be out there till I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't even get my key in the ignition a few times. I would sit in my car, or I would go out and sketch, and most of the paintings have been sold now, but this one was a tribute to the poppies that were grown in the gardens. They had beautiful gardens, and maybe some of you have relatives who went there for their wedding pictures. It was a parkland, and people would go for picnics. I mean, during the pandemic, they still did that. It was kind of interesting. Groups of families would come. And this behind me is actually one of the ponds from Yorklands. So I've done a lot of tons and tons and tons of paintings based on that. So if you've never been, it's incredibly beautiful in every season, and it is worth preserving for our future, for our children.
Yeah, just down York Road, just outside of the city.
Yeah.
And there's no, like, people just walk. You can just walk it. There's no...
Yeah, there is a gate. They don't want people to park in front of the gate, but you can certainly park all along York Road and on the other side. And it says no trespassing, but that means for vehicles. It doesn't mean for people to go through there.
Right. Dog walking, it's popular.
It's great for dog walking. There are many trails, and if you go on the website, you can see aerial views of the property, and there are 13 heritage buildings there. And one of them is deteriorating so badly, it's the chapel, that and there are some Indigenous paintings there that are extremely valuable that are deteriorating very, very quickly because the roof has fallen through on this beautiful chapel. And the government owns it. The Ontario government owns it. And they have been trying to sell off parcels of it or the whole thing, or it's so unwieldy because there are so many protected areas, aspects of it. The built landscape, the actual landscape, there's part of it has to be remediated because they would throw old rags with oil on them. But it was a state-of-the-art facility at the time, the turn of the century, and they rehabilitated youth, really, because the oldest was about 25 or something. They were only in there for a couple of years. It was for theft or something, nothing serious. And they would learn skills. They would learn how to fix cars. They could raise animals. They could garden. There was welding shops. There was woolen mills. They grew all of the vegetables, the leafy vegetables, for all of the public buildings in Ontario, and they made profits when nobody was making profits. A lot of the Victorian houses in Guelph, the windows were made there. So it was, in its time, a revolutionary kind of institution. Mm-hmm. And just for that fact alone, and all the heritage buildings, it should be preserved because it's part of our heritage. Yeah. It's a gem in our community, and it's so close. Yeah. It's like going to Muskoka or somewhere. Yeah. You walk along, and think, look at this. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's magical. And what's this piece? What's the inspiration for that?
This piece is a little anomaly here. It's based. I also become quite inspired by jazz, and I go to jazz concerts, live jazz concerts, and sketch. Like John's doing here. I thought you were taking notes, John, but I think it's drawings. It's just a combination. And so I have become very inspired by the repetition, and I have books and books of just scribbles and lightning kind of lines. And so this piece came out of a concert at the Hoyter Hotel, the Jazz Room in Waterloo.
Oh yeah, the Hoother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another.
Nice. Did your dad play? Was his band jazz?
No. Oh. It was polka.
Oh wow.
Polka and tango. It was like for a wedding or something like that at the time. Foxtrots.
Right.
Mazurkas, because it was a Ukrainian band. Yeah.
Cool. And then this one behind you over here, what's...
Oh, that's Yorklands for sure.
That is Yorklands
Yeah,
as well?
with the,
So
with the dogwood
Right,
in the
okay.
wintertime.
Okay.
The dogwood, the red dogwood against the snow with the sun coming in at 4 o'clock is just breathtaking. And going out in the springtime, I should do a study of all the different dogwood. I should do a chart. Anyway, it looks fluorescent. It looks fluorescent, lime green, fluorescent orange, and then it changes. But if you get there at a particular time in the springtime, just in April, like in March, it's really, really beautiful.
Wow.
With the red-winged blackbirds and nesting. It's very inspiring.
Any other areas close to Guelph here that you go to for your nature inspiration?
Guelph Lake sometimes, the St. Ignatius Trail, just in my own backyard, really, along the river, and the James Street Trail, thank goodness. We all helped with the bridge there, because that used to be perilous, trying to walk around there. Up on the limestone bluffs with the Cotton Club, with the golf course. That's really beautiful along there too. The rail to trails at the end of Arco, and the forbidden places on Arco Road, but we go there anyway. Just across from Starkey Hill.
Oh, okay.
Can't think. It was some places down in near Hamilton.
Rockwood?
Fletcher's Creek.
Oh, okay.
Rockwood. Oh yeah, Rockwood.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, let's go back to nature then, because that was one of the first things that, well, at least that's what you had partly in your bio there, right? The magical healing power of nature. Is that only through art, or what else is it about nature that's magical and healing?
Well, studies have been done that being out in nature lowers your cortisol level, lowers your blood pressure. So just going out for a walk in nature will do that. But then you have the added benefit because doing art also lowers your cortisol. So maybe you have none left if you go out there and you do drawings in nature, and your blood pressure will be 50 then. Wow.
There we go.
Yeah.
There's a nice prescription.
But they do give prescriptions. In Shetland, Scotland, the doctors give prescriptions to go out in nature. And I guess there's, if it costs something, then maybe the government health service pays for it.
Right.
So, but being out in nature it's almost, if I see something really overwhelmingly beautiful in nature, it's like I have to take it in. I have to digest it and integrate it because it's so amazing. A scene, or the way the light comes through the trees, or the ice on the edges of a pond, or especially up at Yorklands with the little Clythe Creek with the little brook. It's almost as if I can't handle it, and I have to take it in, take photographs. Of course, photographs never do it justice, and then absorb it, integrate it, and then do something with that energy. Energy in, energy out.
Right. Okay, I have one more, then I'll open it up. Anything you have not tried creatively that you still aspire to try, or that you figure, well, I'll never do it, but I would love to try this?
I would love to do a graphic novel.
Oh.
I would that I have a binder that says crazy things that have happened to me in my life, and I'd like to do that as a graphic novel. I'd also like to become a professional Argentinian tango dancer.
A professional?
Professional.
Okay. Are you
Yes.
an amateur at this point?
No.
Okay.
Tried. but there's still time.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. Well,
Hang gliding is out. I used to have hang gliding because I
Yeah,
lived in
yeah.
Thunder Bay for a while, and I thought that that was really incredible, flying off Mount McKay. But I think that's probably not advised at
no,
this point.
Yeah. Actually, I thought of one more question because you reminded me earlier that you did spend some time on a native reserve.
Yes.
What did you find, what inspired you about Indigenous culture in terms of their creativity and their expressions through creativity?
Oh, good question. I had taught in Kenora. My first teaching job was in Kenora. And a lot of the students from the reserves were transported down to Kenora. And they were so lonely, and they got into trouble a fair amount. They just didn't know which way to turn. But I realized what incredible artists they were. And because from what people say, it's very true that when you have to observe nature and you have to observe the currents in the river, and you have to, because your livelihood depends on it, and you have to be able to discern all the animal tracks in the snow to see where your prey is going, and you have an acuity of perception that most of us don't have. So that would manifest in their drawings.
Wow.
And even so I was teaching high school kids, and then I had this dream that I was going to teach somewhere near a waterfall, a beautiful waterfall. And I noticed in the Globe and Mail that they were wanting teachers in the far north. So I applied for the job, left teaching in Southern Ontario, and went to, it was north of Thompson, this place called York Landing, and it was a community of 100 people, and my then husband and I taught there for a year. I was the principal, and I taught grade 1 and 2, and he taught 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in one room, and it was an amazing experience. It was fly in, there were no roads, and it really gave an insight into the plight of Indigenous people in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned how to do moose hair embroidery there. I made deerskin gauntlets, because art was a real vehicle to connect with the people. And the chief's wife and I really got along really well. And she was also an artist. So even though I was not teaching the older kids, it was a great way to connect.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a gift for you, right, as well as for your students and the community. Wonderful.
Yeah, it was great.
All right, I'll open it up for questions.
I can't see anybody.
I'm going to repeat it so that the cameras will be able to hear whatever the question is in case it doesn't get picked up.
And I'm sorry that I have not been looking out here a lot, because they told me that I had to put my face right here. So I couldn't talk over here.
So, questions? The last
piece
of jazz music that...
What have we been playing at home? Chet Baker? Yeah.
Okay.
We searched forever for that Chet Baker video. Finally found it after 5 years of going to every single place in the... Other questions?
Yeah. Right. So the question being, some ideas for getting past blocks when there's a creative impulse that is being stopped.
Oh, some of these may be very unorthodox, but turn off the lights, get a piece of paper, close your eyes, and just draw something. Because we're so judgmental of our process that we're just like the top dog there saying, oh, that's no good. Is that the kind of thing you think that or you just can't physically get started? One time for all of January, I did some work I made a promise to myself, even if it was midnight and I hadn't done it yet, and it didn't have to be very big, just something small, and kept those. So I had 31 of them, and that was really good because it was just something that I didn't care so much about it. And yet, some of those were actually quite good in retrospect. So taking yourself out of your environment that you're usually working in, maybe going to a coffee shop, going to a gallery. There are some nice galleries where they have benches and you can sit there. And maybe you can get some inspiration, some energy from the artists there. Going to the Textile Museum in Toronto is a very inspiring place, and they have all those fabrics that are so cheap and amazing. That's also a good thing to do. But getting yourself out of your rut of how you usually are working, or getting somebody else to partner with you and they do something. Do you work directly with the fabric, or do you sort of plan something before you do it?
Wool fiber, stitching, fabric, okay.
There are a lot of Facebook groups too, and then you see what they're doing and what they're struggling with. But maybe do something different with the fiber if it's not so precious. Maybe you could glue something onto a paper or a board or something like that, so that you're getting out of your comfort zone, but you're getting out of how you usually do it because it's not working for you. You've exhausted it. However you've worked in the past, you've exhausted it, and maybe it will come back, maybe it won't. But trying a new tactic, getting somebody else to draw the beginning lines of a page, and then you do something after that. I'm going to drawing in my head because it's the fastest way, and it's the way of getting your your hands moving. But going to Romney Wools in Toronto is also really, really fun. Mm-hmm. And connecting with other fiber artists. And there are lots of them on Instagram and Facebook, and probably groups right around the corner from you, because there's a lot of textile artists in Hamilton. But I have not thanked everybody for coming. I should have said that at the beginning. We've got Eden Mills, we've got Hamilton, we've got all around Guelph, we've got Fergus and everywhere. And I thought if there were 5 people here tonight, that would be a victory. So the fact that people have come out with the weather we've had this week, and it's cold, and I know that everybody would just like to hunker down in some blankets somewhere and not come out to something like this. I so appreciate it. More questions?
And check out the book, like get it at the library or something. There's a whole section in there about blocks, about getting over, because whatever the thing is that is in your way. And if you said sometimes you've got too many ideas, like, are you writing them down?
That's something I've started to do.
Yeah, like just write them all down and kind of take them into your sleep and look at it the next day and see which one pops or that's the thing I'm gonna go with that or something. Yeah.
One thing I didn't say, and I will get heck for this, because my grandchildren are going to be watching this, and they are very inspiring when I work with them. So if you can team up with some child somewhere, it's very encouraging, because you sort of get out of your head and you get into your unconscious, and you all work together. I have a grandchild in town here, and they work on their sketchbook, and I work on my sketchbook, and we watch YouTube videos of whacked out crazy things, and it's so much fun. So,
Cool.
Etta, if you ever see this.
That's a great one. All right. Come on, more questions. Somebody's afraid to ask. Grab your courage and just say, hey, I got a crazy question.
I should probably mention that I've decided on a new project back there. It's called Build a Book, and it's to inspire people to create. And what it is a blank sketchbook, but then you can select inserts. So they will be glued into the book. I used to have them all in books, but then it would take people a long time to go through the books. So I thought, hey, maybe I'll put all the inserts out there, and the books, it's sort of like a custom book that you can order. So there's one image for the cover, and then 6 images interspersed throughout the book. So that's what all that is up there too. So
Excellent. What else, just so people can, what else
that's
is over there?
basically the book's back there, and you're absolutely welcome. Really, I said there were secrets, but they're really. You can look at any of these books. There are more books back there, and maybe it will inspire you to do a sketchbook.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen beautiful sketchbooks done with fiber, and it's pages, but they are experiments with fiber. So that might be fun, interspersed with your writing and your ideas. And I talk with my hands too much.
That's okay. All right. We have a question. Good. Oh, what's your medium for the painting here? Is it acrylic? Is it?
It's acrylic, and then sometimes when I don't think it has enough warmth to it, I put oil on top. And this one behind me is collage, and I do sheets of pattern. That's something that I also do too. When I just can't focus on doing a piece, I'll just do pages of patterns and then cut them up and superimpose them on a background. So that's collage, and that is acrylic, and it has an acrylic gloss on top of it. This the poppies are that is a real departure. I ran out of the gesso in the pandemic, and I couldn't get any, so I had black because I wanted to have some of my students try this black as an alternative to white gesso. Gesso is what you put down first on a canvas so that the paint adheres better, has a little bit more tooth, and it gets rid of blemishes on the canvas. So I thought, I'll do that. And and some people say, don't ever use straight black. It just saps the life out of everything. And that was a departure. But so that is acrylic and oil. And then the jazz piece is oil pastel with cold wax.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
What was the intention with the wax? Was that so the paint would not adhere to those, or was that
No,
for color?
I worked with the pastels. There was these beautiful pastels called portfolio pastels, and I think you have to special order them. We have an expert here from Wyndham Arts. And you can blend them. So I have beautiful paper from Italy, 100% cotton, and with the oil pastel on top, sometimes it gets sludgy, but if you take a brush with the cold wax and you blend it in, it kind of softens it and spreads it further. So that's what I did with that.
Huh.
And the one behind me, this pond scene, is also acrylic with oil on top. So, oh, and we've got some fiber artists here together. That's good.
Do you know each other? Good.
Oh.
Well, there we go. We're coming right to that opportunity too.
Yes. Yes.
Great. All right. Well, we've got a media artist, we've got fiber, we've got painters, we've got all kinds of, I'm sure, creators here. So I'd like to, well, I'll thank
Some musicians, woodworkers.
Great. Wood. What else? What else we got here? Do you know of any other?
Joe does installation pieces, at least he did.
Okay. So, well, thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank
Sharyn,
you.
for,
This was
yeah.
far less scary than I thought it would be.
That's
But I only looked at
awesome.
you and your sparkly eyes, so I was.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Damien, Guelph Arts Council. Thanks to Ed Video Media Arts Center. Thanks to all of you for coming out. And you're not off the hook yet, because now's your opportunity to do a little bit of, I don't know if I want to use the word networking, some conversations about creativity, about what inspires you, what scares you, what you like. I would love to someday try daguerreotype. That's the
yes.
thing that it's like. I've seen movies. I read a Nathaniel Hawthorne book, House of Seven Gables, and I was like, "What is that?" This was like when I was 20.
Maybe
and I
you
was like,
should explain what daguerreotype in case people don't know.
It's ancient form of photography from the 19th century where they use like silver nitrate on metal, and you'd have to expose this pinpoint of light on the metal for like a long period of time, like half an hour kind of thing. So if it was a human, a subject, they'd have to stand still for half an hour or whatever while this sort of, and I don't know, I think I've heard now there are ways to do it safer, like chemically safer, because silver nitrate is like toxic. Anyways, but I've always thought, for some reason, that intrigues the hell out of me, so. But
Do it.
Yeah, I need to find some source now. Some source and maybe somebody, a daguerreotype society or something.
You have to go to Rochester, New York, where the Kodak played.
Oh, I've been to that. That's a beautiful museum.
Yeah, there would be people down there that would probably do workshops.
Maybe. That's a great idea. That's not too far. So that's an example of something that I've never done before. I'm also a writer, so I hang out with Vocamus writers community because I see the value in connecting with other writers. I'm a filmmaker, so I've got filmmakers and Ed Video in my community. So this is your opportunity to just get out and talk to somebody and say, hey, what do you do? Here's what I'm interested in doing. Here's what I've never done before, or here's how I could support you. All right? So I'll let you take it from here and take your time.
And thank you again for this.
You're welcome.
It's a great time.